Thick clouds moved across the Abuja sky like enraged waves, and the rain loomed from above. Stella's clothing was clinging to her skin due to the sticky humidity that replaced the sun, which had set hours before. The faint whimper of her infant in her arms pierced her heart like a knife. From street to market, from street to alley, and from alley to nowhere, she had walked for several hours. Her wrapper was damp at the edges. Her sandals had given out a long time ago. The infant, a little girl with weary eyes and parched lips, had ceased her loud wailing. Stella was terrified by that more than anything else. It was never a good sign when a hungry youngster kept quiet. In Abuja, she drove by the parking area of a high-end grocery store. The vehicles there shone even under the gloomy sky. She was drawn to a black Jeep, not because it was unique, but because the back door was left wide open. A loaf of bread, fresh and untouched, was beckoning me from the seat within. Although Amanda's tummy rumbled, her thoughts were elsewhere. Her daughter's head was now hanging loosely on her shoulder as she glanced down at her. As her heart pounded in her chest, she moved closer. Her hands trembled. Only one loaf. Only this time. She then reached in. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" Thunderous sound. Rapidly stomping heavy boots. Stella grabbed the bread and fled, but she didn't go far. Before she could even exit the lot, a firm grip seized her by the arm. Her grasp on the bread loosened, and it fell to the floor. "Thief!" the guard exclaimed. "You think you can just take bread and leave?" Stella turned around to confront him. Her scarf had fallen off, her eyes were wide and filled with terror, and her hair was unruly. The infant started to cry once more, this time loudly and piercingly. Stella pleaded, "Please, please. All she has eaten is since yesterday." The guard held on tighter. "Are you crazy? You are robbing Mr. James. Do you have any idea who that is?" Stella gave a negative nod. She was ignorant. She didn't mind. She just had her kid in mind. A pair of shining black shoes came into view. The room was quiet as if a curtain had been drawn over it. Tall and flawlessly attired, the guy stood in front of them. His countenance was as hard to read as a closed book. He took in the landscape with his eyes, the bread that has fallen, Stella, the infant. The guard stood up straight. "I caught this woman, sir. She was stealing from your car." The guy spoke with a chilly tone. "My bread?" "Indeed, sir." He now gazed at Stella with more attention. The shivering infant was the subject of his gaze. Stella lowered her head as the infant's scream had grown fainter. Her face was covered with shame. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I will go to the police station." "Just give her the bread, please." The guy said nothing. The guard inquired, "Sir?" He waved him away. "Let her go." "However," I said, "let her go." The guard was perplexed and let go of Stella's arm. Stella knelt and picked up the bread. Like a gem, she wrapped it in her wrapper. Her voice was quiet. "Sir, thank you." The guy turned around, started heading back to the car, but then he paused. He turned his head a little. "Do you have a place to live?" Stella blinked. "No." "A career?" "Sir, no." He spoke after staring ahead once more. "Come with me." Stella's heart froze. "Follow you?" "Your daughter, you said, is hungry. Come here." Stella paused, her mouth agape as the guard gazed at her. Was this a trap? The infant coughed in her arms. It was a faint, dry tone, which she followed. They traveled through the city in silence. Inside his Jeep, there was no sound. Too chilly, too spotless. Stella sat on the edge of her chair, holding the bread and feeding small bits to her daughter, whose mouth seemed to have forgotten how to chew. When they approached a walled property, he at last broke his silence. "What is your name?" "Stella, your child, sir." "Hope is her name." The guy gave a single nod. "My name is James," and Stella had heard of me before. James, the billionaire, powerful CEO and political figure, was in everyone's life. In addition to properties, he owned other things. He held silence, fear, and respect. Why then was he assisting her? They arrived at a mansion that seemed like a dream brought to life. Stella's feet sank into thick carpets as she walked inside. The walls were framed with gold. An overhead chandelier twinkled like stars. The woman in the spotless uniform came closer to her kid as he repeated, "Come." The sight of Stella caused her expression to shift. Her polite smile vanished, replaced by a slight frown. Her gaze moved over Stella's dusty feet and worn wrapper as she said, "Sir, this is Stella. She will be working here." Mabel questioned, "The woman? What exactly, sir?" "House assistance. Find a room for her. Give her food and apparel." Mabel's tone was strained. Stella exclaimed, "All right, why though, sir?" He lifted her hand. "Tonight, get some rest and don't ask any questions." Stella continued to follow her daughter while holding her firmly in her arms as Mabel turned and started walking. They walked through a lengthy corridor. On the marble floor, Mabel's heels made a clicking sound. "Let me make one thing clear," she said finally, her voice chilly, without looking back. "You're here because Mr. James allowed it." "That doesn't mean I trust you," Stella said. "You'll be given a room at the back, small but clean. Don't expect anything more, and don't get comfortable." Hope was held closer by Stella. She remained silent. Mabel came to a halt in front of a tiny door. "This is it." She moved out of the way after opening it. Stella came in cautiously. Although the space was straightforward, with a little bed and an antique wooden chair, it was tranquil, dry, and secure. "I'll bring the kids some food," Mabel said matter-of-factly. "You will begin working tomorrow morning." Stella replied gently, "Thank you." The only thing Mabel did was close the door. Stella entered a new universe in that manner. However, Stella was unable to fall asleep that night, even in the luxury of a plush bed, where Hope slept soundly for the first time in days. What was his reason for helping her? When he gazed at her, what did he see? James was gazing out a window in the other room. At long last, the rain had begun to fall. It slid down the glass. 2 years after he had buried his wife and daughter. Since then, he hasn't allowed anybody inside until today. And not even he could say why. Long before she was seen begging for bread in the rain, Stella had a life. It wasn't flawless, but it was hers. In a little 2-room home constructed of red mud bricks in a small community outside Abiada, she had been raised. Despite the wind whistling through the wooden windows at night, the interior remained cozy, and the roof constantly leaked throughout the rainy season. Mama G, her mother, was a roadside fruit vendor. Stella was only 6 years old when her father passed away, leaving Mama G to care for 3 kids by herself. Stella was the middle child, and she was reserved, watchful, and never liked to say too much. She quickly mastered the art of balancing a tray of bananas on her head and smiling at people to persuade them to make a purchase. She acquired the skills of sharing her food, patching up old clothing, and getting by. They were a family, even if they were poor. Stella had learned to survive by the time she was 15. In order to find greener pastures, her elder brother left the hamlet. He wasn't heard from by anyone ever again. One wet season, Ella, her younger sister, contracted a bizarre ailment that she never got over. That left Stella and Mama G. They became closer still. They giggled, they wept, they prayed. But one day, they met a guy named Sam. He had a tall frame, a big smile, and eyes that shone whenever he gazed at Stella. He stated that he owned a business in Lagos, and that he wanted to improve her lot by marrying her. Mama G paused. Despite her youth, Stella was only 17 when the guy approached her with kind words and promises. He made weekly financial transfers. He went there frequently. He spoke gently and warmly. Therefore, they wed and she departed the hamlet when she turned 18. Initially, Lagos gave the impression that it was all she had ever wished for. People everywhere, wide roads, bright lights. Sam's residence, however, was not at all what he had told me. Mushin had a single room at the back of a noisy complex. He didn't own a store. He wasn't even employed consistently. He worked weird jobs here and there, leaving early and returning late, occasionally intoxicated, occasionally enraged. Stella never whined. She did the cooking. She tidied up and reminded herself to be patient. Several months went by. After that, he punched her one evening. It wasn't a slap. She was hit by a powerful blow that sent her flying against the wall. She cried and bled. She remained. "I was furious." The following morning, he stated, "It won't happen again." However, it repeated itself time after time. Stella quit going outside. She used powder and long sleeves to hide bruises. No one helped, the neighbors murmured. The realization that she was pregnant came to her one day. She had a brief period of optimism, Perhaps this would make him change. Perhaps Sam's heart would be softened by a baby. However, he was not happy when she told him. Following a period of silence, he became enraged. "Do you think I planned for this?" he yelled. "Do you want to trap me?" Things only became worse from that point forward. He quit coming home for days at a time. He came back with a stronger voice and strange odors. Stella would wrap her arms around her tummy and pray that the baby would be okay. Then, when she was 7 months pregnant, Sam vanished abruptly. Stella waited, looked, and asked around. There was no farewell, no letter, nothing. After 2 months of missed rent payments, the landlord evicted her. "Please," Stella pleaded. The guy refused to pay attention, despite her tears. He slammed the gate and tossed her belongings into the street. She shivered next to a gutter, holding her tummy, during her first night on the streets. A government facility is where hope was born. A compassionate nurse helped Stella give birth despite her lack of funds. The infant was little but robust. Because that was all she had left, Stella called her Hope by that name. She spent the next year traveling from spot to spot, beneath bridges, in unfinished structures, and in crowded shelters where the air was filled with the odors of perspiration and illness. She did laundry for folks she didn't know. She went to bus stops to beg. With Hope tied to her back, she strolled the streets. However, Abuja had no mercy. She was able to pay for meals some days. She didn't on the majority of days. She picked up the skill of maintaining optimism alive with bits of cloth. She learned to sleep with one eye open. She acquired the ability to vanish when the wrong sort of guys got too near. However, she had never stolen anything before. The day that Stella had walked till her legs gave way and discovered the bread, when the baby's lips were dry and her body was fragile. Everything was altered by that single, desperate choice. She was now in a house with a bed, a roof, and a room that she could call her own. However, attaining peace would be difficult. Stella sat on the edge of the little bed that evening, contemplating her past and future as she watched Hope slumber by her side. She didn't have faith in it. James was not someone she could trust. She clearly didn't trust Mabel, who had earlier thrown a plate of rice and beans on the table without saying a word and slammed the door. Stella had noticed the expression in her eyes, the subtle animosity and judgment. In a foreign environment, she was an outsider. She didn't travel this far simply to lose, though. Not for herself, not for her child. With a start, Stella awoke. She was unable to recall her location for a brief period. She was used to the rustling of strangers, street noise, and cold cement floors. However, this location was unique. The room was silent, too silent. The room had cream-colored walls, a high wooden wardrobe in the corner, a large window with white curtains that moved softly in the wind, and a soft bed beneath her covered with a spotless pink blanket, which she inspected carefully. Her Hope was still soundly asleep at her side. Stella gently placed her hand on her daughter's back and took a deep breath as her little fingers curled up like flower petals. She still couldn't accept that this was happening. Someone knocked on the door. It was firm but not loud. Stella shot straight up. Her pulse began to quicken. The door opened and Mabel entered before she could speak. Her hair was pulled back behind her head, and she was dressed in the same dark blue uniform as before. She didn't grin. She replied curtly, "You should be awake by now. At 7 o'clock, it's breakfast time. Delays are not liked by the man." Stella blinked. "I was unsure of the time." "Oh, don't be silly," Mabel said with a smile. "A wall clock exists. Use your eyes." Stella peeked over her shoulder. A silver clock was ticking over the window. She didn't even realize it. "Come," Mabel said. "Leave the child here. I'll show you the kitchen." Stella rose, arranging the wrapper around her waist. Mabel smiled and said, "She'll be fine. This is not the street," as she looked down at Hope once more. Stella followed her out the door and into the long, peaceful corridor. Everything had the aroma of lemon soap and polish, and the floor beneath her feet was gleaming and smooth. "This house has rules," Mabel declared as they strolled. "No wandering, no touching what is not yours." The walls were covered with paintings, each depicting a face of someone she didn't recognize, all of whom seemed to be protecting secrets. "Just talk when someone addresses you. Concentrate on your job and avoid any problems." Stella nodded wordlessly. They entered the kitchen. Stella had never seen such a large kitchen before. Silver fridges, flashing equipment, and shelves full of stuff she couldn't name. 3 other women were already there, rushing between the trays and pots. "Joy," Mabel said, "the master chef. Angel and Peace are these. You're here to help and clean. Don't inquire, don't whine." Joy, a little lady with round cheeks, paid Stella little attention. Neither did Joyce or Sarah say anything. Stella took a step ahead after swallowing. She spent the next hour washing dishes, wiping counters, sweeping floors, and cleaning. The soap made her hands tingle, but she persisted. Mabel's voice came back to her mind. "Do your job and avoid getting into problems." She glanced out the kitchen window at one point and noticed a large garden. Birds soared through the sky as flowers of every color danced in the breeze. James was sitting by himself on a bench beneath a tree, with his back to the residence, and a swing moved softly. Stella came to a stop. Even though he was still mute, he had an aura of almost a statue. He just sat there, gazing at the floor, not speaking to anyone or moving. Joy screamed, "Stop daydreaming, you think we're here to look at flowers?" Stella kept scrubbing while swiftly turning away. Her stomach growled and her legs ached by midday. Since Mabel threw the dish at her the night before, she hadn't eaten. She sat on a little stool behind the kitchen and took out a biscuit she had kept in its wrapper. It was at least something, even if it was now soft. Mabel returned as she bit. "She said that after lunch you would be cleaning the guest restroom upstairs. And keep that baby quiet at night. The gentleman is averse to loud noises." Stella glanced upward. "She's only a kid." Mabel raised an eyebrow. "After that, you'll be back on the streets if she trains her, or both of you." Stella's cheek grew heated. She nodded and bit her lip. Without saying a word, Mabel turned around and walked away. The biscuit in Stella's hand caught her attention as she glanced down. She wasn't hungry anymore. Stella went back to her room that evening after spending the day scrubbing the bathroom tiles till her fingers were sore. With her little arms stretched out and her mouth open in a weary scream, Hope was awake. "I'm sorry," Stella murmured as she gently scooped her up, sat on the bed and rocked her. "This is all for you. I just need time. Only a short period of time." She glanced out the window. The sky became gold and orange as the sun set. Now that the garden was silent, James was once more by himself on the same bench. Stella merely glanced at him. The way he stood gave the impression that he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. As though he could feel her gaze on him, he gave his head a small turn. Stella's heart skipped a beat as she took a fast step back. She clutched onto Hope as she pulled the curtain closed. She didn't comprehend the people, the rooms, or the objects within this house. However, Stella was familiar with unusual locations. For her daughter, she would remain strong, and perhaps one day, even in this world of polished floors and chilly stairs, someone will notice her at last. A loud knock on Stella's door marked the start of the next day. Mabel opened it before she could respond.